So let's show you how to stop overpaying for materials, because it's unbelievable how much money you can lose if you're continually overpaying. Just to give you an example, let's imagine that you're a business that does say 2.5 million a year in revenue. Now we know that most businesses spend between 35 and 40% on materials. On average, it's going to vary per business. So let's imagine you're doing 2.5 million a year. If you're spending 40% on materials, that's $1 million a year that you're spending on materials. Now imagine you could drive that material cost down from between 5 and 10% every single year. And that is really achievable if you apply the principles we're going to show you in this training. So if you're spending $1 million a year on materials and you drive that down 5 to 10%, nice and easy, you're going to have between 50 and 100K in your back pocket as profit. So it's huge, and it's something that really needs to be focused on. So let's dive into the training, and we call this training our Streamlined Procurement system. Now you're going to be falling into one of these 4 boxes, but clearly the aim is you want to be getting materials as cheap as possible. You don't want to be overpaying, and you also want to get them as fast as possible. So you've got to get a balance, haven't you, between getting the materials there nice and quickly, but also getting them there at the price that you need. Now some people fall into this box here, which is absolutely awful. They're well overpaying for materials, paying a huge amount for them, and it takes them ages to actually get the materials there because they're just inefficient on site, and maybe the office staff aren't quick to order things. So they end up losing money. People are waiting around on site, and it's just a complete waste of time. You're losing a ton of money here. So we don't want you in that box. We find some others might be a little bit better, where yes, they're getting their materials nice and cheap, so they're shopping around for them, but because they're shopping around so long, it takes them ages to get the stuff there. So that's inefficient. There's no point, again, people standing around on site waiting for stuff. Even though you've got the material cheaper, there's no point doing that if it's slowing you down. So we don't want you being inefficient. Where we find, I would say, 80% of clients generally sit when they first start with us is that they're in the overpaying box. So what this means is you're more concerned about getting the materials there quickly because you have to get things done on site, and you end up overpaying for it. You just order wherever you can, whoever can get it there the fastest. So this is where most people sit, and they'll sacrifice the cost of the material just to get it there as quickly as possible so that the site workers can keep moving. Maybe you're in that box. Where we want you is over here. We want you to get it there fast as possible and for as cheap as possible. We call this the streamlined system, and that's what we want for you. We want to get you a nice streamlined procurement system for your materials. So maybe you could just mark where you are in that box, and what we're going to look at now is what is it going to take to get you up here in this corner. So we know there are 3 strategies to get you a nice streamlined procurement system. And these are the simple 3 things we have to do. You have to have a clear process in place when you're ordering, so that you know that the process is being followed, then it's going to be done the right way every single time. If you want to get the best prices, you need to be able to pre-negotiate with your suppliers, and we'll give you some tips around that. And the third thing you need to do for efficiency is to plan ahead, and we'll show you a little cadence that you can follow in your office team on how you can get these 3 things in place. If you do these 3 things, you'll be nice and streamlined as a business. So let's look at the first one first of all. What sort of process do you need in place as a business? Well, these are the 3 processes that you need. You need to have a way of tracking and have some accountability around the ordering system. So a way of doing that is having order numbers to be able to track your orders. This is going to make it so much easier for the bookkeeper or whoever's doing your accounts to be able to monitor that you actually receive the items. And you also need to be able to track the items against certain jobs, specific jobs, so you have job reference numbers on them. And you can use systems and software to be able to generate order numbers. It's pretty straightforward to do. We use a system in our developed mastermind called Cost Tracker. It's a system that I developed many years back, and we give that for free to our mastermind members that help them track and keep accountable on their ordering system. You also need a method of making sure your order is accurate and that you can verify it. And of course, really important is you have some financial control and budget management. What you don't want to do is be overpaying for specific material orders. Let's imagine you're doing the roof and you end up overpaying for trusses and whatever else, and you go well over budget on that when you should have really been shopping around and keeping that phase under budget. So we've just got some practical ideas on how you first implement this process. One really simple thing you can do is develop a standardized order form. So you've got this order form that goes out. It can be emailed to suppliers, or your team in the office, your admin team, are just reading off of it. But if you have a standardized order form, that's going to keep it nice and uniform, and it captures everything in there. So there's a few ideas on what you can put on that order form to make that nice and standardized. As we've already said, you have to have unique order numbers. You need to be able to quickly identify what you ordered and what job it was for. All the big companies will use order numbers, so there's no reason why you shouldn't too. It's nice and easy. You can have a nice approval process. This can be good if you're doing high ticket items. If they're over a certain value, maybe you want a project manager, or maybe you yourself want to be able to sign off on certain things like that, especially if they're coming in over budget. You can implement the inventory and finance systems. So that can be useful if you're holding actual stock. You can have software in there to monitor what stock you've got and what's in your lockup potentially. You can link that to your finance systems like Xero. And obviously the last tip you want to be able to do is regularly review and audit your material ordering process. Just make sure it's really working for you. So that's the first thing that you need to be able to do. Have an actual process in place for ordering, rather than people just turning up at Travis Perkins or Bunnings or wherever it is that you go for your materials. Make sure that people actually have a process in place of how you do it as a company. That's really going to help you be more efficient. What's the second thing? Well, the second thing you want to be able to do is to pre-negotiate with your suppliers. If you can pre-negotiate, it takes the hassle out of worrying if you're getting stitched up with a price. And if you can agree terms and conditions and certain prices before you're actually ordering off them, and you've got that log somewhere, that's going to make things much easier for you. So some people get a little bit lazy with this, and they don't get the sales reps out, and they don't pre-negotiate with their suppliers, and then they're really frustrated that they're constantly paying over the top prices. So make sure you pre-negotiate. And the beautiful thing about pre-negotiating is that you can actually play suppliers off of one another. So a simple tip that we used to do, we used to go to one of the cheapest suppliers. We'd ask them to send them all our prices on a Excel spreadsheet, so we'd have everything there. So how much are we paying for cement, how much are we paying for timber, how much are we paying for plaster, all that sort of thing. And we would have individual prices against every line item, and then we would take the supplier's name out, and then we would go and send that to another supplier and say, right, we want you to match or beat these prices, what can you do? And then you do it again. You do that with 3 to 5 suppliers. Then you go back to the first supplier and say, can you beat these prices? And what you're basically going to do is just drive every supplier down on individual cost items. And what you'll clearly be able to do then, once you've pre-negotiated and you can see who's the cheapest on what item, is that, say you need cement, you can quickly go onto your spreadsheet and you can clearly see there who is the cheapest supplier for cement. I've got to order 100 bags. I know that I need to go to this supplier for that. I don't have to shop around to get the cheapest quote. So pre-negotiation can be really useful. A few tips on pre-negotiation. It's pretty straightforward. I've just told you what you need to do, but do some market research. Make sure you actually try and find some new suppliers and work out what's out there and who's the cheapest for it. Shortlist your suppliers, because you only want to do this really with maybe 3 to 5 suppliers, because what's really important too with suppliers is that you get a good relationship with them and you want things there quickly, so there's no point using a supplier that messes you about all the time. Have a negotiation strategy, so make sure that you're talking about your delivery schedules and payment terms. So maybe some of you that might be working for main contractors or developers, maybe you don't get paid for 30 to 60 days and you need to actually change the payment terms with the supplier. Suppliers will be willing to do this if they know in advance. So if you need a 60-day payment term for your suppliers, then be upfront and let them know that if you can promise them a certain amount of orders every month, they may well be willing to agree to that. And make sure you've got clear documentation of what you agree and you save that somewhere so you can go back and reference that if they end up overcharging you. So there's a few tips there, first of all, for how you pre-negotiate and drive those prices down for suppliers. The last thing you need to do, which is absolutely crucial to maintain efficiency, is that you plan ahead. So what we've identified already is that you've got a nice process in place and you've negotiated your prices down. But if you don't plan ahead and all of a sudden it's Monday morning, 8 o'clock, and everyone's screaming on site that you're out of a certain material, you're not going to be able to do anything about it, are you? Even the best suppliers aren't going to necessarily be able to turn up within an hour or so. So clearly planning ahead is going to be really useful for you. This is what you want to do to plan ahead. A few ideas here. First of all, before any job starts, you do a material requirement analysis. So try and do a takeoff on every job that's beginning before it starts, and this can be done many, many weeks before you begin. Work out what are the materials you need and work out, are any of those materials on a big lead time, and you can just identify that. Put a timeline in place. So although you'll have a timeline for how you're going to complete the project, also have a timeline that runs alongside it for your material ordering. So if you know, for example, you're going to be installing windows and doors in 8 weeks time, and you know that the lead time for the windows and doors is 6 weeks, then put that on the timeline, a critical marker saying windows and doors must be ordered by this time. That's really crucial. Set up some volume purchasing potentially with your suppliers if you've got space to keep stock, and maybe you know that you're going to be ordering a load of insulation for a project and you've got a yard that can contain it. Think about volume purchasing for it so you get it there nice and early and at a great price. And also have a contingency plan in place. That's really crucial. If your supplier is going to let you down, do you have a backup? So they're the three things that you need to do to enable that you have a streamlined procurement system. So just to recap those again, what did we look at? You need to have a nice process in place that everyone's following in the business, from your site workers to your project managers to your admin team. Get a nice process in place, particularly with order numbers. Make sure you pre-negotiate in advance so that you've got the best prices coming from your suppliers and you don't have to worry that you're getting stitched up paying retail prices. And the last thing you want to do is plan ahead, so that you know when you need to order and get it done well in advance. So they're the three things you need to do, and that's going to make your streamlined procurement process work for you in business. Again, that's just a small thing that we touch on with how to help you drive your material costs down and get them to site more efficiently. That's just one process. We've got a load more that we'd love to help you implement in your business. So if you'd like to book in a call with us so we can talk about your number one bottleneck, then click on the link and we'll be glad to have a chat with you.